A plume of boiling water rises on schedule in a remote corner of Yellowstone National Park, again and again, with a precision that feels almost mechanical. How can a natural system buried beneath layers of rock behave with such regularity? What hidden architecture beneath the surface allows heat, pressure, and water to synchronize so reliably that an eruption arrives nearly every 3 hours? And why has this rhythm persisted for well over a century, outlasting generations of observers who have come and gone while the cycle continues uninterrupted? Far from the crowded boardwalks where visitors gather around Old Faithful, another geyser quietly maintains a more consistent schedule. Lone Star Geyser sits in relative isolation, several miles away from the park's busiest thermal basins. Reaching it requires effort, and perhaps that distance has helped preserve its reputation among those who make the journey. While Old Faithful is widely known for its predictability, Lone Star operates on an even steadier cadence, erupting approximately every 3 hours, a pattern documented since the late 19th century and believed to have remained largely unchanged for around 150 years. At the surface, Lone Star presents itself as a classic cone geyser, its structure rising several feet above the surrounding terrain. The cone is built from silica sinter, a mineral deposit formed when silica-rich hot water emerges from underground and cools rapidly upon exposure to the air. Over time, as countless eruptions deposit thin layers of this material, the cone gradually grows, creating a narrow vent through which water and steam are forced upward during each eruption. The geometry of this cone is not merely aesthetic, it plays a critical role in regulating the geyser's behavior. Beneath the cone lies a complex plumbing system carved into volcanic rock. Yellowstone sits atop one of the most geothermally active regions on Earth, fueled by a vast heat source deep below the crust. This heat originates from a mantle hotspot, where molten material rises closer to the surface, transferring thermal energy into the surrounding rock. Groundwater percolates downward through fractures and porous layers, eventually encountering zones where temperatures exceed the boiling point under surface conditions. However, because of the pressure exerted by overlying water and rock, the liquid remains in a superheated state, well above 100 degrees Celsius, yet still not boiling. The key to Lone Star's clockwork eruptions lies in how this superheated water is stored and released. The geyser's underground system includes a reservoir connected to the surface by a relatively narrow conduit. As heat continues to flow into this reservoir, the temperature of the trapped water rises steadily. Pressure builds as well, maintained by the weight of the water column above. For long periods, the system remains stable, with no visible activity at the surface beyond minor steaming or small splashes. Eventually, a critical threshold is reached. A small disturbance, such as the formation of a steam bubble within the conduit, begins to disrupt the balance. When a bubble forms, it reduces the pressure locally, allowing some of the superheated water to flash into steam. This sudden phase change expands rapidly, pushing water upward and decreasing pressure further down the column. The process cascades, with more water converting to steam in a chain reaction. Within moments, the system transitions from quiet storage to explosive release. Water surges upward through the narrow vent, emerging as a powerful jet that can reach heights of around 40 to 50 feet, roughly 12 to 15 meters. The eruption phase of Lone Star typically lasts for several minutes, during which a mixture of water and steam is expelled in pulses. As the reservoir empties and pressure drops, the intensity gradually diminishes, and the geyser returns to a quieter state. What follows is a recharge period during which groundwater refills the reservoir and heat once again accumulates. The remarkable aspect of Lone Star is not merely that it erupts, but that the duration of its recharge phase remains so consistent. In many geysers, this interval varies widely due to subtle changes in water supply, heat flow, or internal geometry. In Lone Star's case, the system appears to have achieved a stable configuration in which these variables remain within a narrow range. The size of the reservoir, the dimensions of the conduit, and the rate of heat input all interact to produce a near-regular cycle of approximately 3 hours. This stability is not accidental. The cone itself acts as a regulator, restricting the flow of water and steam and maintaining the pressure conditions necessary for periodic eruptions. The silica sinter lining the conduit also reduces permeability, preventing significant leakage that could otherwise disrupt the timing. Over decades and centuries, as mineral deposits gradually alter the internal structure, the system appears to self-adjust, maintaining a balance that preserves its rhythm. Temperature gradients within the geyser's plumbing play a critical role as well. Water entering the system from the surface is relatively cool, but as it descends, it is heated progressively. The deeper portions of the reservoir reach temperatures well above the boiling point at atmospheric pressure, sometimes approaching 150 degrees Celsius or more, roughly 300 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on depth and pressure. This superheated water stores energy that is released during each eruption, driving the upward jet. The interaction between pressure and boiling point is central to understanding why the system does not erupt continuously. At greater depths, the boiling point of water increases due to the weight of the overlying column. This allows water to accumulate heat without immediately converting to steam. Only when pressure is reduced, either through upward movement or the formation of steam bubbles, does boiling occur rapidly. This delayed boiling mechanism is what enables the buildup of energy necessary for periodic eruptions rather than constant venting. Observations dating back to the 1880s indicate that Lone Star's interval has remained close to 3 hours, with only minor variations. Records from early explorers and scientists describe similar patterns to those seen today, suggesting that the geyser's internal structure has been stable for an unusually long period. This contrasts with many other geysers in Yellowstone, which can change behavior over time due to seismic activity, mineral deposition, or shifts in water supply. Earthquakes, even those occurring at significant distances, can influence geyser activity by altering subsurface pathways. Small changes in fracture networks can redirect water flow or modify pressure conditions. Yet Lone Star appears resilient to such disturbances, maintaining its rhythm despite the dynamic environment of the Yellowstone region. This resilience may be due to the simplicity and robustness of its plumbing system compared to more complex geysers with multiple interconnected reservoirs. The isolation of Lone Star also contributes to its stability. Located away from heavily trafficked areas, it experiences less direct human impact. While Yellowstone's hydrothermal features are protected, subtle influences, such as changes in drainage patterns or surface compaction, can affect groundwater movement. Lone Star's remote setting reduces the likelihood of such interference, allowing natural processes to dominate. The cone's growth over time provides additional insight into the geyser's longevity. Each eruption deposits a thin layer of silica around the vent, gradually building up the structure. Measurements of the cone's size and composition indicate a slow but steady accumulation consistent with centuries of activity. The uniformity of these deposits suggests that the eruption pattern has remained relatively unchanged, reinforcing the idea of long-term stability. Chemical analysis of the water reveals high concentrations of dissolved silica, along with other minerals typical of Yellowstone's geothermal systems. As the water cools at the surface, silica precipitates out, forming the hard white-to-grey sinter that characterizes the cone. This process not only builds the structure, but also seals microfractures, helping to maintain the integrity of the conduit and preserve the pressure conditions necessary for regular eruptions. The soundscape around Lone Star reflects its cyclical nature. During the recharge phase, there may be intermittent splashing or minor bubbling, signals of activity deep below. As the next eruption approaches, these signs can intensify slightly, though they do not always provide a precise warning. When the eruption begins, the sudden release of steam produces a roaring sound, accompanied by the rhythmic surging of water. After the eruption subsides, the system quiets once more, returning to its steady accumulation of heat and pressure, Comparisons with Old Faithful highlight the uniqueness of Lone Star's behavior. While Old Faithful's intervals can vary based on the duration and intensity of previous eruptions, Lone Star's cycle remains more tightly constrained. This suggests differences in reservoir size, conduit geometry, and heat flow between the two systems. Lone Star's simpler configuration may contribute to its more consistent timing, whereas Old Faithful's larger and more complex system introduces greater variability. The broader geothermal context of Yellowstone provides the energy that drives these phenomena. Heat from the underlying hotspot continuously warms groundwater, creating a vast network of hydrothermal features, including geysers, hot springs, fumaroles, and mud pots. Each feature represents a unique combination of geological conditions, resulting in a wide range of behaviors. Among them, Lone Star stands out for its regularity, offering a natural example of a system that has reached a stable equilibrium. Understanding the mechanics of Lone Star requires considering both the microscopic and macroscopic scales. At the microscopic level, the formation of steam bubbles and the properties of silica-rich water influence how energy is stored and released. At the macroscopic level, the size and connectivity of rocks and fractures determine how water moves through the system. The interplay of these factors creates a feedback loop that governs the timing of eruptions. The enduring regularity of Lone Star Geyser becomes even more striking when examined over longer stretches of time, where subtle variations begin to emerge without disrupting the overall rhythm. While the interval between eruptions averages close to 3 hours, careful observations reveal that each cycle is influenced by what came before it. A slightly longer eruption may be followed by a marginally extended recharge period, while a shorter burst can reset the system more quickly. Yet these small fluctuations rarely accumulate into major deviations, suggesting a self-regulating mechanism that continuously corrects imbalances before they grow. This behavior reflects a delicate equilibrium between heat input and water supply. Beneath Yellowstone National Park, the geothermal gradient remains relatively stable, providing a steady flow of thermal energy into the geyser's reservoir. At the same time, groundwater recharge appears consistent, likely fed by snowmelt and precipitation filtering through layers of permeable rock. If either of these inputs were to shift significantly, the timing of eruptions would be expected to change. The fact that they have not, at least not in any dramatic or lasting way, points to a system that has reached a long-term balance. The geometry of the underground plumbing continues to play a defining role in maintaining this balance. The conduit connecting the reservoir to the surface is narrow enough to restrict flow, yet wide enough to allow the rapid ascent of water and steam once an eruption begins. This balance prevents the system from leaking energy prematurely while still enabling a powerful release when conditions are right. Over time, mineral deposition subtly reshapes this conduit, but rather than destabilizing the geyser, these changes appear to reinforce its consistency. Silica layers smooth irregularities, sealing small fractures and maintaining the pressure needed for cyclical eruptions. Another factor contributing to the geyser's stability is the absence of multiple competing pathways. In more complex hydrothermal systems, water may circulate through branching networks of fractures, creating unpredictable interactions that disrupt regularity. Lone Star, by contrast, appears to rely on a relatively simple and direct connection between its reservoir and the surface. This simplicity reduces the number of variables that can influence the system, allowing it to maintain a steady cadence over extended periods. Thermodynamics governs the deeper processes at work. As water descends and heats, it stores energy in the form of increased temperature under pressure. The deeper portions of the system may reach temperatures far exceeding the boiling point at the surface, yet remain liquid due to the pressure exerted by the overlying water column. When the eruption begins and pressure drops, this stored energy is released rapidly as water flashes into steam. The expansion of steam drives the eruption, converting thermal energy into mechanical force that propels water upward through the vent. The efficiency of this energy conversion is a critical component of the geyser's behavior. If too much heat were lost between eruptions, the system would struggle to build sufficient pressure for a consistent cycle. Conversely, if heat accumulated too rapidly, eruptions might occur more frequently or become more intense. Lone Star's steady interval suggests that heat input and heat loss are closely matched, allowing the system to recharge at a predictable rate. Seasonal changes introduce another layer of complexity, though their impact appears limited. During colder months, surface temperatures drop and snow may accumulate across the landscape. This can influence the temperature gradient near the surface and potentially affect how quickly water cools after an eruption. However, the depth of the reservoir and the strength of the geothermal heat source buffer the system against these external fluctuations. As a result, the overall timing of eruptions remains largely unchanged throughout the year. Hydrological variations, such as periods of heavy rainfall or drought, could also influence the geyser by altering groundwater availability. Increased water input might raise the level of the reservoir, slightly affecting pressure conditions, while reduced input could lower it. Yet even here, the system demonstrates resilience. The porous volcanic rocks surrounding the geyser likely act as a natural storage system, moderating changes in water supply and maintaining a relatively stable flow into the reservoir. Comparisons with Old Faithful continue to highlight the uniqueness of Lone Star's behavior. Old Faithful's eruption intervals can vary depending on the duration and intensity of previous eruptions, reflecting a more complex internal structure. Lone Star's more consistent timing suggests fewer variables at play, allowing it to operate with greater predictability. This contrast underscores how differences in underground geometry and fluid dynamics can produce markedly different surface behaviors, even within the same geothermal region. The long-term persistence of Lone Star's pattern also raises questions about how geysers evolve over time. Many hydrothermal features in Yellowstone have changed or disappeared entirely as their plumbing systems shifted. Some geysers have become dormant, while others have emerged unexpectedly following seismic events or changes in water flow. Lone Star's persistence suggests that its current configuration is particularly stable, though not necessarily permanent. Over geological timescales, even the most consistent systems are subject to transformation. Seismic activity remains one of the most significant factors that could disrupt this stability. Earthquakes can alter fracture networks, opening new pathways or sealing existing ones. In some cases, geysers have been observed to change their behavior immediately after seismic events, with intervals lengthening, shortening, or becoming irregular. Despite Yellowstone's active tectonic environment, Lone Star has largely maintained its rhythm, indicating that its plumbing system is either well insulated from such disturbances or capable of rapidly re-establishing equilibrium. The surface expression of the geyser provides additional clues about its internal processes. The cone's shape, height, and composition reflect the history of eruptions, with each layer of silica sinter representing a moment when mineral-rich water cooled and deposited its load. The cone continues to grow incrementally, though the rate of growth is slow, measured in millimeters over many years. This gradual build mirrors the steady pace of the geyser's activity, reinforcing the impression of a system governed by consistent forces. During an eruption, the sequence of events follows a recognizable pattern. Initial splashing may precede the main burst, as small amounts of water are expelled and pressure begins to drop. This is followed by a sustained jet where water and steam rise in a column that can reach dozens of feet into the air. The height and intensity of this jet can vary slightly, but the overall structure of the eruption remains consistent. As the reservoir empties, the jet weakens, transitioning into intermittent bursts before finally subsiding. After the eruption ends, the system enters its recharge phase once again. Water begins to refill the reservoir, and heat continues to accumulate. Small steam emissions or minor bubbling may persist at the surface, but these are only surface expressions of the much larger processes occurring below. Over the next few hours, the conditions necessary for another eruption gradually rebuild, setting the stage for the cycle to repeat. The predictability of this cycle has practical implications for observation and study. Because the interval is relatively consistent, researchers and visitors can anticipate eruptions with a reasonable degree of accuracy. This makes Lone Star an ideal subject for monitoring changes in geothermal activity over time. By tracking subtle variations in eruption timing, duration, and intensity, it is possible to gain insights into the underlying processes that govern not only this geyser but others across the region. Despite its reliability, Lone Star remains a natural system, not a machine. Its behavior is governed by physical laws, but also by the inherent variability of geological processes. The fact that it has maintained such a steady rhythm for around 150 years is a testament to the stability of its current configuration. Yet it also serves as a reminder that this stability exists within a dynamic environment. The broader setting of Yellowstone continues to evolve, shaped by the movement of tectonic plates and the persistent influence of the mantle hotspot below. Heat flow, groundwater movement, and mineral deposition are all part of an ongoing process that reshapes the landscape over time. Within this context, Lone Star represents a moment of equilibrium, a system that has found a balance between competing forces and maintained it across generations. If you found this deep dive into one of Yellowstone's most consistent natural phenomena fascinating, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth explorations like this. And do not forget to tap that hype icon to help this video reach a wider audience and keep bringing these remarkable Earth stories to light.